Bootstrap Confidential, the podcast where we talk to successful bootstrappers about the playbook for bootstrapping.
Welcome to Bootstrap Confidential, where this episode I'm delighted to welcome Sophie Bruce, the founder of MOLO, both a founder and a trained and qualified psychologist, and excited to talk to her today about MOLO and about the use of psychology as a founder. So welcome to the show and thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, great to be here.
So I always like to start with this question. Obviously, I know from your background that you were involved in a number of startups, but never quite the founder, always just part of the management team. So some people would say that should have taught you enough not to go and found a business, but with you, it actually made you go, you know what, I can do this. So what was the moment where you decided, I'm going to do this myself?
Yeah, I think when it became so obvious that I couldn't think about anything else, I really tried to give it a good crack and be sensible. I knew that it was not going to be easy to start my own gig. And actually, with the way our family set up and I was the breadwinner, it actually made sense when I had a small baby to stay in something sensible. But actually, it just got to the point where I couldn't authentically do that and give the best version of myself to that business that I was in. And actually, over time, I'd built up all the skills that I needed, and there was never going to be a right time. So it was just that point where actually I needed to make the leap, and I was super ready to do it.
And just to explain, because I know it's linked to obviously being a mum. So what is MOLO? What problem are you solving?
So MOLO solves the mental load for parents. So it's an AI-driven chief household officer, we call it, for your family. Modern day families aren't set up in the same way that they used to run years ago. And actually, when we spoke to parents and understood their challenges and what they needed, what we realized is they actually needed additional thinking power and resource within their family. So what we've done is create that through a mobile app using the power of AI and tech.
Fantastic. Like 20 years ago, aging myself, sounds like it would have been absolutely perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm always interested. So you decided to bootstrap initially, and obviously you've been talking to parents, you've been doing market research, you've been talking to end users, you've been trying to find out what the pain points are and what the solution is.
Yeah.
So why bootstrap initially rather than just going straight out and trying to get some VC funding to support you while this is all going on?
Yeah, I guess a few reasons. One, I think going through that bootstrapping process sets you up well for when you have got funding. So you start to be really lean, you lean on all your connections, you work out all the cheap ways to listen to things, you listen to podcasts, you chat to other founders who've been in that space. You really get all of your ducks in a row so that if and when you do decide to go down a funding route, you can do that effectively. And certainly I know we are fundraising now, but I will be operating the business in the same way as if we haven't got fundraising, which I think is a smart and lean way to do it. And I know that our investors definitely resonate with that. I don't think we would have raised either, is the other thing. The fundraising market is tough. It's definitely tough as a woman, it's definitely tough in Europe. And actually, without having all of that work behind us to get to this point, we definitely wouldn't have raised.
You mentioned it's definitely tough as a female founder, which is a topic in itself. So quite a few of the female founders I've had on the show as guests: Taryn Williams, Sam Dybeck, Olivia Leong, Jane Bianchini. They've all talked about the unique challenges, both from a potential raise point of view, but also from a running a business point of view, being a mum with a young child. So talk through some of the challenges and what you think potentially some of the solutions are to help female founders.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk to you about this all day. I think there are definitely challenges. Somebody actually asked me a question the other day, and when I responded with them, they were quite shocked. I think sometimes we romanticize and think that we're closer to an equal society in that way than we are. I think we've got a long way to go. Certainly from a stats point of view, there's only 2% of VC funding that goes to female-led businesses. So we kind of know we're on the back foot. I think the way my brain works is I see that as a massive opportunity, and it's like, okay, maybe there's some challenges for us there, but we've also got privilege in terms of the way we were raised, like the education that I've got, the people in my network that I've got. So let's not use this against us, and let's use it for us. So I've done a couple of female founder accelerators, and we were able to get really sharp and really clear on what our value was. Got a huge network of female founder support, which is unbelievable. The female allyship out there is also amazing from both an investor and other businesses' point of view. I think people do want the tide to turn. But I think that, yeah, probably the hardest bit is the fact that I have got a now 3-year-old. I've built this business up since, like, MOLO was born out of a problem I found with her when she was a baby. So literally her whole childhood has been me thinking, getting up at 5 a.m, writing down ideas, meeting people, her under my desk while I'm plugging away on the laptop at the weekend, and managing all of that. I don't like the word juggle, it's used a lot, but managing that alongside being a good mother, wife, daughter, sister, all of those things is really, really tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. And how do you, what strategies do you have in place to cope? I mean, being a founder of a startup is all consuming. Being a new parent is all consuming. Trying to do both of those things simultaneously. I mean, it's great that what you're building actually will ultimately help you. Although you probably wish you'd built it a few years ago. But how do you cope with that kind of like that the toll that takes and trying to get that life balance? What are sort of things that you do to help you with that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say, this is a mindset thing, but also the support I put in place. I'm really unapologetic about not feeling like I have to be on all the time. Like, I take breaks. I will take, if my brain's exploding, I will take a full weekend off and not look at anything. I will ask for friends to look after my daughter so that I can do work. I will put her into creches. I will access support. I know that I can be an excellent mother whilst not being with her all of the time. And actually, some of the lessons she's learning from the way that I'm approaching my work will service her and will position her in the future. And I think knowing that parenting journey doesn't look exactly the same for everyone, so sort of not subscribing to some of the pressures and some of the narrative around what good parenting or good motherhood looks like, and again leaning into that support network. I've got a super supportive husband, super supportive family, so I'm able to get a little bit of time back, as well as obviously doing all the basics we know that make you feel good, like non-negotiable exercise, eating well, making sure I get some sleep. Sleep's a really big one for me. And I've done it before. I've done the whole 5 a.m. club thing, and MOLO was built in the 5 a.m. club, but it was not a sustainable strategy for
No.
me. I know it works for some people, Maggie Thatcher, but not for me.
And just how much, obviously you're trained and qualified as a psychologist. How much has that helped you develop these strategies? Because a lot of people would not be able to go, you know what, I don't need to be omnipresent in my child's life, and I don't need to feel guilty about doing this, but and I'm providing a role model. Lots of people wouldn't be able to do that, and they'd be putting themselves from left to right, trying to do all things for all people. So how much does that help you? And are there any other ways it's helped you as a founder?
Yeah, honestly, it kind of underpins everything I do. So I think psychology in general, and an awareness of psychology and good mental health, and what raising a child looks like within that context, is framing how I think about everything, how I look at the world, how I face challenges, how I problem solve, how I look at her behaviors, how I look at my behaviors, how we're interacting together. So honestly, my psychology background underpins everything, and I think it also is compassionate, and allows me to have a compassionate lens on myself. I don't beat myself up around things, and that's definitely come from my training, and is something that I help other people with. And then in terms of the product, it's really a USP that this is a psychology led product, because it is a psychological problem. It's not, when we spoke to our users again and looking at other solutions on the market, what we found is it's not doing any task that is problematic. It's not materially difficult to go onto Amazon and buy a Lego set to take to a kid's birthday party, but actually the cognitive load of holding all of that information all the time and never switching off, and transitioning from being like parent mode to then being in work mode, that's the pain point, and that's the psychological problem. So my skill set and my friends and network and peers is a huge part of that solution.
One of the things that happens a lot now is, and which I often discuss with guests, is this concept of sort of founder tourism, which is the media glamorizes, for lack of a better phrase, the founder journey. And someone launches an app, and 6 months later they sold it for $1 billion, and lots of teenagers and people in their early 20s look at that and go, I'm not going to go for a corporate job. I'm going to go and do that. That looks easy.
Yeah.
That's fun. And then they go and they experience the reality of trying to build a startup. What as a founder community, as successful founders and practitioners of startups, do you think we can do to try and get a better balance? Because it can be pretty, um, it can be an incredibly negative experience for someone if they are wildly optimistic and it's not grounded in reality, and they go out and they run headfirst into the pretty bruising reality of being a startup founder. What are some of the things that you can think we as a community can do better?
Yeah, I think we need to call it out first of all. Like, let's take the shine off things. I've started doing this weekly rose and thorn post on my LinkedIn, where I every week give one thing that's gone well and one thing that's gone wrong, or is difficult in that week. What's interesting is if you look in my notes where I'm making where I'm putting all of the ideas down for that, my thorns list is significantly longer. It's really, and whenever people ask me at the weekends, friends and family say, how's MOLO going? And the answer that comes to my head is savage. It's really, really hard. Normally I don't say that. I come up with some other reframe of how we're, making loads of progress and pushing things forward. So I think actually there's a responsibility on us to check and challenge the way we're presenting it. Don't watch too many movies where it's glamorized. I think there's definitely there are different trends kind of across Europe and the US. But I also think I just wouldn't be equipped to face some of these challenges if I'd have gone into building MOLO straight out of university or any other business. Like, every single job, every experience, every interaction that I've had kind of between me selling sweets and crisps at school to make a little profit to where we are now is what is making us successful and work. Not that it's always successful, things absolutely go wrong, but yeah, I think that breadth of experience is really important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to have a team meeting every Monday morning, and talk about at least one success that we'd had in the previous week. And yeah, about at least half over the years, at least half those Mondays, you're spending a weekend desperately trying to slightly rephrase something from last week so it sounds like a success. Otherwise,
Yeah.
all you've got is all the things that went wrong, and that's not inspiring on a Monday morning. But so you talk about all your experience and everything, and this is a question I always think is interesting for founders, because whether you're a founder, whether you're a co-founder and part of a founding team, it's incredibly rare that you're going to have all the skills that you need from the get-go in order to build a business. You're going to have your operational skills or your financial skills or your sales skills or your product build skills, which means at quite an early stage, particularly when you're bootstrapping, you need to either self-teach, and get onto podcasts, get onto online learning, or go and pick mentors' brains, and I want to come back to that in a second, or you bring other people on board. So how did you go about going, okay, so this is what I can do, and this is what I can do at a stretch and teach myself, but here are some gaps, and how did you think about filling those?
Yeah, really good question. I'm the ultimate generalist, Charles. I'm not good at any one thing, but I'm very good at bringing it all together. And actually, that's one of the hardest things with bootstrapping at the moment is I'm over way too many things and I'm bottlenecking loads of things. And actually, I'm bringing the quality down because other people would do a better job than me on specific things, but we can't do it. So I definitely sit across a lot of things. But I knew for MOLO to be good, we needed the best possible people in the seats that really mattered to help me shape it. So our CPO, who's led on product, Pippa, is somebody I used to work with, but she's also unbelievable. And there's nobody else that I would kind of want to ask when you're thinking about how to design a product and how to get that to market. Similarly, Dan, our CTO, hugely experienced, but also a father of two young kids and gets it. I think the personality thing is huge for me. It's people I want to work alongside, but also people who are experts in their area. And then it's a lot of favors a network when you're in that bootstrapping phase, which again is something I find really uncomfortable. I don't, I wish that I was paying both me and everybody else in this business at a level that, reflects all of the hard work they're putting in. But that the reality is you just can't do that early doors. And actually, I wouldn't have got MOLO to where it is now without people kind of buying into the mission, believing, jumping on the opportunity and running with it with me. And it's been, a huge support. And I'm very much looking forward to paying them some fat salaries when we're out the other side.
And just at the start, so as you say, it's one of the greatest challenges of a startup is that you need people to come and work for less money than they get elsewhere, generally for longer hours, generally with more stress, for less certainty. So you really need them to buy into the mission, the vision, the culture. So you've obviously got, a growing team. So how deliberate have you been about, okay, this is going to be the culture of MOLO. These are the type of people that we want to bring in from a personality point of view, as you mentioned. How deliberate have you been about that? And what are some of the things that you've done to really try and embed that culture from the start?
Yeah, very deliberate and very non-negotiable. And again, I think this is where my psychology background has been helpful. What I was doing with sports and businesses was advising them on how to build a high-performing culture and what that looks like in terms of how you set things up, the policies you've got in place, the communication you have, the expectations you have with people, clarity around roles and responsibilities. But for me, I'm viewing MOLO as a chapter in my life. I don't know how long that chapter is going to be. But let's say 5, 7, 10, 20 years that we're building this thing, life is too short for me to be spending that with people that I don't want to have a beer with. Or somebody told me this once: never work with someone who you wouldn't A, have a beer with, or B, trust them to look after your dog for the weekend. So that's the test for people coming in. And I always have, so in terms of process, I've either gone to people I know or people I know through people I know, or I have an initial kind of chemistry check conversation where we don't talk about business, we don't talk about the role, we literally just get on and have a chat for half an hour before we even explore the conversation. So that's, I guess, a little bit of a screening process. But with that, I do have to be mindful that I'm also picking the best people for the business, not just people who I want to be friends with. So there's a fine balance between recognizing differences and getting the right strengths and depth of experience throughout the business, whilst also making sure they fit kind of the cultural expectations of how we operate.
Yeah, I was talking to a founder the other day who's English but lives in Singapore, and they said their test was, okay, if I had to fly from Singapore to London, which is a 14-hour flight, and I was sat next to you in an economy seat, would I be nervous? Would I go, that's not a problem at all, we could just chat the whole way there? And if there's any hesitation of like, I don't want to be sat in that seat next to you, then I don't want you coming into the business, which I think is important, because the stress you're under as a startup that everybody's under, like, amplifies, as a psychologist, amplifies issues, and people's lack of patience can get shorter and shorter, or their incredibly good normal amount of patience can rapidly reduce under stress. So making sure you've got a functioning team is key. But you've mentioned mentors quite a few times and your network, and I'm always interested in delving into this. I have to say I don't agree on many levels with Elon Musk, but he obviously has built quite a number of successful businesses, and he always has 5 mentors at any one time that he rotates every 6 months. So my argument has always been, okay, well, if an entrepreneur who's had as many successes as he's had needs mentors, then perhaps we should all think about it. So how have you used mentors and sort of approached them, and how valuable have they been for you in helping you get MOLO up and running?
Yeah, completely invaluable. I probably slightly disagree with Elon switching them out every 6 months. I would say I've got kind of longer term mentors, but the way I think of them is I think of them as my personal board of advisors. I've got people who know me very, very well. They understand both my strengths and my weaknesses. I'm able to have unfiltered, non-judgmental conversations with them and share kind of really what is going well and what isn't. And I trust them absolutely with their perspective, but I also don't fully onboard all of their opinions. I kind of, the way my brain works is to speak to a range of people who I trust and look at the world in a different way, listen to what they've got to say, and then bring it in-house and kind of make my own judgment on that. So I've got people in my advisory board and my mentors who are really, really different, but I value all of their perspectives. I have set up an AI advisory board. I don't know if anyone else has done this. Who you've
No, talk me, how does that work?
Yeah, so on ChatGPT, and this is what I do switch out based on kind of people I come across in the press or I see on LinkedIn. But you can create, I've got a specific prompt I can send through actually, but it's like, set me up an advisory board. These are the people. I want this person to be super harsh. I want this person to be really reflective. I want this person to big me up and motivate me. And then
Wow,
you can run board meetings like in the ChatGPT, and it's very cool.
that sounds amazing.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hadn't come across that.
yeah,
So you've been bootstrapping for a couple of years.
yeah,
As you say, you're looking forward to that moment when you start to get a bit of scale. You're looking for investors at the moment, and you can pay your CPO and your CTO, the big fat salaries that they deserve and everything.
yeah.
And at the same time, you're talking a lot about the pathways to growth and all your experience from a sports psychology point of view in that. So as you start to grow and scale, and as you move from a bootstrap business to a business that's now got funding, the culture changes, and as you start to scale, things change. So, how are you thinking about how you think about that from a strategic point of view, and also importantly from a cultural point of view? And just to give you an example, my favorite story about this, which was a female founder who bootstrapped for years, and had a very symbolic, almost broken coffee machine that barely worked in the middle of the office that everyone had to use to get coffee. And after a number of years, went out, got some investment, got a good amount of money into the business, went on a 24-hour business trip, and after the money had come back in, and all her team had grown up bootstrapping with her and were used to doing things on a very frugal, lean basis. And suddenly this money came in, and she came back from this business trip, and they had replaced the broken coffee machine, not with a coffee machine that worked, but with an actual barista, a human barista, plus a coffee machine, that God knows what costs. So it's not just yourself, it's the team as well that gets impacted. So how are you thinking through the impact of that and how to manage that change?
Yeah, really good question. And actually, this is where there's a synergy, I think, across kind of my home and my work life. I can remember a friend of mine who's got older kids saying and being aware of our privilege. I'm very cognizant of the fact that our daughter goes on lovely holidays and it drives in an SUV, and we live in Surrey and it's all lovely. And that's not how I grew up. I certainly grew up without money and without lots of the material things that I would have liked. And I think that's what innately created that drive in me to hustle and make every penny count. And I think now that's playing into MOLO. And so even though I guess that this is a long way of saying whatever actually is the bank account, I want me and everyone within our business to be operating it as if that money isn't there. Like, what is the maximum value we could get? What conversations could we have that could allow us to leverage kind of lower costs in certain areas? What testing can we do that's completely free? How much are we being innovative? I don't want to just go and do what everyone else is doing and throw money at things when it's not kind of evidence-based or it's not relevant for our business. I think it's easy to get swept up in the startup world of, well, this business did that and they were successful, so we'll go and do that. I don't think that's how it works. So I think us maintaining really open conversations and being a bit scrappy and having the broken coffee machine and working out of each other's houses to save rent costs, like I think all of those things create a culture where you're not explicitly having to say be careful with money, but people just know that that's what we do and that's what we stand for.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that cash burn occurs, particularly with startups, particularly in this the age of social media, and I would imagine, especially with an app-based solution like you have, is obviously marketing, branding. It just chews through cash at a terrifying rates. And as you say, there are all these investor-led startups saying, oh, you need to go and spend XYZ on getting your brand out there, or you need to do this to get your brand out there, or so. being scrappy, you know, kind of guerrilla marketing style, what are some of the things that you have tried that have succeeded, and maybe some of the things that haven't gone so well as you've tried to get, you know, MOLO out there? You know, how have you thought about getting the brand out there from a Bootstrap point of view?
Yeah, it's a good question, and certainly you referenced marketing there, but we're really mindful of that. And the reality is, as we build MOLO out, the first product, the second product, the third product is not going to be the shiny end product. You know, if you look at the iterations of Spotify, for example, like the first versions are really clunky. So for us to invest loads of money into marketing and getting everyone on that first version is just not sensible.
Yeah.
So strategically, we've kind of mapped out our growth in a way that allows that. So we're keeping it, you know, our numbers, and sometimes I get kickback from VCs that you're not ambitious enough, but my follow back to that is like, yeah, fine, but I'm building this in a way that it will work, and it is sustainable, and we're not just going to go bust because I'm telling you we're going to get 5 million people on it in the next 12 months. It's just not true, and other people will bullshit you, but I won't. To your earlier questions around some of the things that we've tried, honestly, you can do anything now. What a time to be alive. You know, you can start billion-dollar businesses from your bedroom. LinkedIn is a huge platform. I've had some of my posts go viral on there. Interestingly, the ones that resonate the most are the ones where I'm talking about parenting, being a bit of a scramble, parenting and founder hustle. But that's got really big, and I'm having conversations with people kind of in the States, Australia, Singapore, all from LinkedIn, and I'm really kind of committed to building my personal brand on there as well as MOLO. What else have we tried? We've done some kind of score app stuff. We do lots of surveys. We've got consumer groups set up. We try and get our community to advocate on our behalf, and also, yeah, leveraging all those founder networks that I spoke about. And I think that's where MOLO is a really easy sell. If we're successful with MOLO, the world is a better place objectively. So I think people can subscribe to that in the way they wouldn't with I don't know, another piece of HR software.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say as well, that you're so aware that the product you build now is not going to be the product that you ultimately use for fast growth and scaling. So I think that's where so many founders fall over. They have this amazing light bulb moment, which the media again constantly sort of hypes, and then, you know, I'm going to build this product and it's going to do this, whereas actually you kind of need to poke around in corners and get to know your customers and the community, and generally where you end up is about 5 or 6 steps from where you initially thought when you actually start building the product. But just talking about, you know, some of the things that can go wrong, and it's probably leaning slightly more on your background in sports psychology. One of the things when you're growing really quickly as a startup is, yeah, you have successes and you have things that go really well, and every single founder I talk to says the one thing, like resilience, resilience, resilience. You have to build resilience because you will get rejected and you will get failure and experience failure, and you will make big mistakes and you'll make small mistakes and you'll get things wrong, and you have to be able to just learn from it and carry on. So how do you and your wider team think about that? Because again, in the corporate world, it's, you know, well, you need to do this and it needs to be a success. You can't just try loads of different things and, you know, sort of throw mud at the wall and see what sticks, and then pivot and go charging after that. So how do you think about dealing with stuff when it goes wrong? Because that's a real challenge for every founder.
Yeah, and like something I wildly underestimated. I would have considered myself resilient, and yeah, again, on my sports like background, I would work with other people to develop that, and I've done loads of conceptual academic understanding of what that word means. But the reality of you know, particularly in fundraising, pitching to 99 people and getting no's and then getting 1 yes, that's the kind of numbers you're talking about, and there's nowhere else in life that you would be, you know, doing 99 job interviews without getting a job, or going on 99 dates without getting a second date. But that is just the reality of it. I think I'm completely obsessed with the fact that this can and will work, and that actually the people who keep going are the ones who win, whatever that looks like, whatever twists and turns. I don't expect it to be shiny. I expect it to be hard. And again, having support and structures and the mindset to just relentlessly keep going. And I've been in employed jobs that are really rough as well. I think it is hard. It's hard in a different way, and you get the good bits with it. I really try and shoulder the team from a lot of that. I think I view it as my responsibility. This is my vision I'm bringing to life. We're all a collective unit, but I'll take the hit on a lot of that stuff. Having said that, the team are really experienced. I don't need to sell my philosophy on kind of product development and being scrappy and not being perfect. I am bringing people into the business who understand and have been in either the startup space or are interested in that kind of thing. I'm not bringing, going back to your cultural piece, we're not bringing people in who need like loads of consistency and need everything to be super clean and work from 9 till 5 with an hour's lunch break in the middle. That just wouldn't work. So I think we know what it's going to look like, and then when those things happen, we can run with them.
And you talk about bringing people in, and obviously you mentioned a female CPO, Pippa, I think, and then a male CTO. And so this is something I always find really interesting, and the analogy I always use is around parenting, ironically for your app. So it seems to me in every startup, your ability to grow is a coefficient of how quickly you and your team can spot a problem and work to provide an optimal solution in the shortest amount of time, and then roll it out. And the quicker you can do that, the faster you grow. And if you can't do that, you'll grind to a halt. And the quicker you grow, correspondingly, the more mistakes will occur and the more things that need fixing. And what I always like to think about is, as a parent, when your child hits another's child, does something they're not supposed to, and thinks it's funny, like, everyone, when the first parent goes, well, okay, this is the kind of life I want, and this is where they'll go to school, and all the big macro stuff, the micro daily stuff of like they've thrown food in your face, all of that, like, kind of like is a daily challenge which you and your partner have to go, okay, how are we going to deal with this? And typically there are some things where you both go, we should do this, and agree. There are some things where you go, we should do this, and you slightly disagree, and you eventually arrive at a compromise solution. And there's some things where you have really quite different ideas for how to proceed. But generally, out of that becomes the best. The compromise isn't just a compromise; it's generally the best solution for the child. And when you're thinking about a startup, that's another way to go. So when I was building RFI, we were 50-50 male female the whole way through, right up to when we're a global business at every level up to the board, for that simple reason, based on parenting. So when you're thinking about diversity, and it's a slightly loaded question from the way I phrased it, but when you're thinking about diversity in your culture and growing the business, how important is it going to be for you? And what are some of the things that you're thinking about to really keep diversity, if you are thinking about it, alive and recognized in the culture?
Yeah, it couldn't be any more important, and something very much at the forefront of my mind, but also something that we don't always get right. I got challenged early on. We were a fully female founded business at the start, and I was sort of really leaning into that. The whole female lens, the fact that we were empowered, strong professional women who were bringing this to the fore, but somebody challenged me on the fact that actually that's going to leave a gap in how we're thinking about things, and so Dan came in, and he was the perfect man for the job. And I think you can't, with diversity, it has to be around equality of opportunity and awareness of different backgrounds and who you're bringing into the business, but you cannot do that kind of just for the sake of doing it. And that's not what we did at the start, but definitely is not what we're going to do throughout. And I am also conscious of our lack of diversity in terms of socioeconomic backgrounds and how we were raised and where we live in the country and how we're representing the solution for our customers. So we need to make sure that that's on point. And I think one of the things that comes to mind for that straight away is we are going to be a global product. So we're launching in the UK, but then fast follows to sort of North America and Australia and New Zealand. We are going to need to have representation from people on the ground in those territories to make sure that we're not making assumptions on how people operate in those environments, even if they are, inverted commas, similar to how we run our families in the UK.
And you said at the start there that you were challenged, and it's a perfectly reasonable challenge. But one of the things that discussed with female founders is obviously there's the lack of investment, not just from VCs, banks very rarely lend money to female-led startups, but then there's the broader sexism. And a couple of podcasts ago, I was talking to Jane Bianchini, who said, I just simply refused to let someone be sexist. I just refused to countenance it in my conversations with them. So how do you, as a female founder, deal with that and sort of push back against that, or any sort of aggressions that you think you're suffering on that basis?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that, in that sexism is a concept, and if you don't subscribe to it, you can almost just not let it be a thing. I think it's more challenging in the fundraising space, because you have to entertain conversations in a way that you wouldn't, and I think this is where it justifies Bootstrap. In the same way, in a sales process, you tolerate kind of bad customers, or lack of response times, or behaviors that you don't like in those customers, you sometimes will need to do, because you need to get that revenue in. That being said, we're being very selective on the investors that we bring into the business. Is not the value we need outside of capital is as important, if not more important, than what we bring in from our cap table, and we really want our cap table to kind of represent what we're trying to do as a business. So like, coming back to your earlier question, I don't buy into it. I think it's bullshit. I will challenge back where it's appropriate. I'll tell you a funny anecdote, actually. This didn't land very well, but I thought it was funny. So I had a call with an investor. The reality is, a lot of investors are of a very similar profile. This gentleman was of a certain age and a certain skin color. And he asked me, who would be the person who would most want you to fail? And I responded with the patriarchy, and he deadpanned me and did not laugh at all.
No.
Yeah, it was I thought it was funny, and the reality is, that is the truth. The people who don't want us to win are people who don't want more equal homes and families, because of the power that provides them. And actually, let's just use that as rocket fuel to go out there and change the game and how modern day families work.
Yeah, one of my most interesting ones was about 7 or 8 years in. I decided we needed a new CFO, and there was myself and my co-founder were both male. And in all the international offices, they happened to be all run by females. And I thought the male-female dynamic was really great. And so I went to, I can't mention the name, but a high-end global search firm. And I said, I'm looking for a CFO. I didn't say I wanted a female CFO. I just said I'd like, if possible, to see some female CVs, because I think it'd be really great to counterbalance myself and Al if we had a female voice sitting at the top. And I had a long conversation about the pros and cons of this and why I thought this was a good idea. Went back, all the CVs came through. I think there were 7 of them. They were all male CVs, and I rang up the quite senior partner, and I was like, slightly confused here. Thought we had a really good conversation about this. And he literally turned around and said, "Oh, I thought you were joking."
Wow.
I was just there going, okay, we need a different search firm. But yeah, no, that's always kind of stuck in my head as an extreme example. But just a couple more questions, because we're almost out of time. So obviously you've got a community, because you're solving a problem for parents, and it's quite easy to go and find parents, and mums via Mumsnet and dads and everything. But how do you take that established community and turn it into an online community that you can test with and advocate, and that can advocate for you and support you, and you can run ideas past? What are some of the things that you did to move that into from just a normal community into a MOLO focused community?
Yeah, so I think bringing people on that journey with us, and our ability to build in public and share kind of where we are on that journey, what is going on, and when they can expect to see things from us, and being really transparent about what isn't going well. But I think also the consumer groups were game changing for us. So getting smaller members of our community together in a room, chatting through specific problems and specific tech and non-tech solutions, and how that could impact them. And then you've also almost got these kind of MOLO super users who are then chatting to their friends at dinner parties. I'll have people all the time who will message me on LinkedIn and be like, oh, I was talking to someone at an event the other day, and they were talking about your product. And I think being in and around the community, obviously we're in London, so there's loads of stuff going on, but every time somebody thinks of a parenting solution, thinking of MOLO, that's the way we've really made that community work for us.
And you said, you said a few moments ago that you thought you were resilient, and you, because of your background in sports psychology, and then obviously you went on the journey as a founder and have discovered new levels of resilience are required to get through. So, if you could go back a couple of years to yourself as you were about to start this journey, and have an imaginary track, because time travel doesn't exist, and say, okay, know this one thing, what would be the one thing that you would tell your younger self, or that you would tell any other founder, male or female, who's about to start on the journey, that they focus on this one thing, and it's not going to solve everything, but it's going to make life easier or better?
Yeah, really good question. What I would have told myself, like, have the runway, like back at almost do it as a business plan from the outset of like, okay, this is my monthly burn rate for me as a human being, and this is how long I think it's going to take to get investment, double that, or this is how much I think it's going to be before we can generate revenue, and have a really clear understanding of what is between you being comfortable and when things are going to start going wrong, because that's when it puts pressure on you, that's coming internally rather than externally. I think to me and to other people, I would get scrappier than I was. I think so we were having investor conversations and they were like, well, we want you to generate revenue. So I was like, okay, how can we generate revenue without having a product? But we got something out in like 3 weeks, and we've got paying users on that now, and we're actually getting loads of data through that. You can vibe code stuff on Lovable or whatever. I would double down more on kind of product scrappy, revenue and client understanding earlier, rather than I did a lot of the infrastructure around how to set the business up. Because of my ops background, the kind of tech COO background, I was like, what steps and processes do we need to have here to really set the business up? But it's kind of a moot point, because if you don't have a good product and clients on there, then you don't need good structures and governance kind of throughout the business. So I would, that would be my advice. How can you make someone pay for something you're giving them as early as possible? And what can you learn from them?
I think that's fantastic advice, especially for anyone bootstrapping, like, getting that minimum viable product, that bare bones of something out there that someone will pay for, so that you can test your ideas and grow the business and grow the product whilst also putting food on the table. Such a critical thing. But we're out of time. Sophie, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your story so far. Would have been great if you'd done this like 15, 16 years ago, as I said, when I was dealing with 4 small children and trying to start a business. But no, it sounds like an absolutely fantastic solution, and wish you all the best, and look forward to catching up again soon to hear how it's all going. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Charles. Speak soon.
For all our listeners, if you'd like to hear more podcasts on how to bootstrap, or if you want to access all our bootstrapping resources and playbooks, then just go to our website, www.bootstrapconfidential.com, for free registration.